B'Shem Kol Yisrael. We're going to learn today Parshat Shmeeney with the Slonimer, the Netivos Shalom. So in this inspiring article, he asked the following question. We know in this week's Parshat, Nadav and Avihu, the children of Aaron, pass away for some sort of sin. And he starts off pointing out that we can never fully grasp what giants like Nadav and Avihu, what mistake they made. And he, throughout his mimer, makes this humble point that we don't really understand. But at the same time, it's written in the Torah. So we've got to do our best to try to learn the lessons that the Torah is trying to teach us. So we know that Nadav and Avihu were extremely holy people. Moshe Rabbeinu writes, "Hu asher divrei," this is what was told to me on Har Sinai, "Bikrovai akadesh," through those who are close to me, I will be sanctified. And the Midrash says that Moshe felt that he would be sacrificed and sanctify God's name, but it turns out Nadav and Avihu were even holier than Moshe and Aaron themselves, and that's his consolation that he gives to Aaron, that they were very holy people. And that's very nice, but that only makes the question stronger. How could such holy people have made such a mistake, and what exactly was their mistake? So it seems to kind of be an open-shut type of case, because the Torah tells us, because they brought a fire, an eish zara, asher lo tzivautam, which I did not command them. And that's it. They brought a fire in some sort of sacrifice. But this does not seem to be satisfying. First of all, we know that there are times when an individual can bring his own fire for a sacrifice. A hedyot, as it's called, is allowed to bring an offering onto the Mizbeach for a korban. So comes many midrashim and gemarot and suggest that there are other sins which were really the problem. So, for example, the Gemara in Sanhedrin points out that Nadav and Avihu were walking behind Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron, and they said, "When will these two old men pass away so that we can take their place as leaders of the nation?" Wow. There's another Gemara in Yuma, which says that they were Mora Halacha. They taught Halacha without asking Moshe Rabbeinu, without asking their Rebbe, what's the Halacha? There are other midrashim, one famous one quoted by Rashi, that they drank wine. And that's why the very next law that we learned about was not drinking wine when being Moreh Halacha. They drank wine as they went into the Holy of Holies. And the Zohar quotes this opinion as one of the reasons why we drink wine on Shabbos, to fix their mistake, actually. Fascinating. And other opinions that they didn't wear the right clothing. And finally, we have opinions saying that they never married or never had children. So what do we make of all of these different opinions in the Midrashim and the Gemara? Now, of course, one could just simply say, well, there's confusion, so every rabbi has their suggestion. Kind of similar to the whole Moshe Rabbeinu situation, where everyone's trying to figure out what exactly was the sin of hitting the rock. But that's not the derech of Chassidus. And in general, we always try to make it one answer, which has one essence, instead of just saying it's a machlokas. That's what you'll find throughout Torah. So Netivos Shalom answers like this. The truth is that on a spiritual level, Nadav and Avihu actually were giants, even higher than Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron in some respect. They had amazing spiritual potential. However, there was one thing they were lacking, and that's called a certain degree of humility, a certain degree of being machnia yourself, humbling yourself to a Rebbe. Now the Slonimer goes on a little tangent, and he says that the purpose of Torah and mitzvahs, as we all know, is dveikus b'Hashem, to attach ourselves with God. If you've learned a little Chassidus, you know that this is something the Slonimer is always talking about. The whole purpose of life is to attach ourselves to God. The Midrash And the Gemara points out that at times we don't feel like we can personally feel so connected to Hashem. So one of the ways of being mitdabek, to attach to Hashem, is to be mitdabek to Tamidei Chachamim, to wise men. Why? Because Hashem's shefa, his blessing and his word is flowing through our world, but the way to connect ourselves to that was originally through prophets, and then to Tamidei Chachamim who had Ruach HaKodesh. And now, even if a Talmid Chacham doesn't have Ruach HaKodesh, by being machnia ourselves to be a makabel, to receive from the mashpia, from the giver, we receive that heavenly connection. And the Slonimer goes so far as to say that even if you're on a higher spiritual level than your Rebbe, still everyone needs a Rebbe to receive that light from Hashem. That act of being humble is what helps you receive the Torah. Actually, in this week's Pierre, Moshe, he was the humblest of all men, and that's why he could receive the Torah. That's why Har Sinai was chosen. It's only through humility that Torah really flows through us, because it's not just an intellectual game here. It's something about our soul, and our soul needs to be cracked open through that humble act of humbling yourself and receiving from a Rebbe. And the Mor Nevuchim writes that when a person is in a state of Devekus, then he has a Shmira Elyon, he's guarded over by Hashem. And so if another view would have been misdabek to Talmidei Chachamim, Moshe and Aaron, then nothing bad would have happened to them. But because they lacked this midah of humility, they made these great mistakes. And this aligns with all the Gemaras that we've learned. They were more halacha before the Rebbe. They didn't ask Moshe Rabbeinu before they went and brought the sacrifice. According to one opinion, they were even allowed to bring the sacrifice because they didn't ask permission. It was the wrong thing to do. Or they were so excited about being close to Hashem that they drank wine and they didn't wear the right clothing because they didn't have the necessary patience involved. And perhaps it is also related to not having wives and not having children, because they also didn't want to give. They didn't want to mekabel, and they also weren't able, therefore, to give to others. So it turns out that all of the questions can be answered. The essence of their sin was the lack of their humble relationship to a Rebbe, and that's what led them down this mistaken path, although they had great spiritual potential. The lesson for us, of course, is obvious, that it's so important for us to have mentors and Rebbes and Rebbes to ask questions to. Even if we feel like we know everything, we could just ask Mr. Google. Nonetheless, even if we really do know everything, it's really important to have external rabbis and rebbitzins and teachers and friends and wives to be nitziya'itz with, to ask advice from, and to be mekabel from. And this is something that is a little hard when you're in quarantine. But nonetheless, Hashem has given us opportunities through Torah shiurim and through phones to still connect to teachers. And maybe we can use this time period to ask ourselves who really will be my Rebbe. And that's something that, definitely our community needs to work on. I have to work on it. We all have to work on, to try to ask ourselves who can be someone who's objective, who can help me grow, because to just do it alone, it's very often not realistic. Just one last point. If you want another beautiful shir on this topic of Nadav and Avihu, I do recommend Rabbi David Foreman's Aleph Beta. He has an amazing shir there comparing the Garden of Eden to the sin of Nadav and Avihu. May Hashem bless you with a beautiful Shabbos with your family. May this Torah be for the refuah shalema of the whole world. And I really hope you enjoyed this Torah shir from the Slonimer, a beautiful blend of pshat questions and creative art answers, like an art piece, with a very relevant message to take home with us. Good Shabbos.